Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on paying for college. Now, what I'm talking about is specifically being ordered to pay for your children's college when they become adults. There may be unusual circumstances where a child gets into college at an early age, like 16 or something like that, where it gets murky. And because the child is still a minor, it's conceivable, possibly, that a judge may, under the best interest factors, order a parent to do this. I'm not sure that that means that the parent couldn't challenge it on appeal anyway, even if a judge says it's under best interest, but that's just my suspicion. When it comes to children over the age of 18, there aren't any states that require parents to cover the college education of those children. There are some states that actually have statutes that forbid the judge from doing that. The other states are silent on the issue, like for example Nevada, it's silent on the issue. So sometimes I, as a person having gone through the system, have concerns that maybe there will be like a rogue judge out there that uses the best interest factors to order a parent to pay for college. Like if they can afford it, maybe they're rich parents or something like that. But even in those circumstances, I would still be interested to see what would happen if a parent would challenge that on appeal. I haven't seen any cases where a parent was ordered to pay for college. There are situations that arise when a parent agrees to it in a settlement, and then later on they renege on that, and then it comes back to the court on all kinds of issues like contempt of court, stuff like that. But I'm not really covering that in this video. I suppose this video isn't going to be a really long one. I pretty much covered how it seems to work across the country. There are many states that are silent on it and don't discuss whether a judge has the authority to do so or not. And typically that means you default to the judge who does not have the authority to do it. The only thing about family law is there's that overarching best interest fuzzy bubble of who knows what the heck goes in that category, really. In fact, I have a whole separate video on the best interest of the child. My understanding is that the best interest factors are supposed to come into play to determine who gets, physical and legal custody of the child. There is this general idea that the best interest of the child controls the court's decision in all areas, but like I mentioned earlier, that can really get out of control. So this is mainly a video where I'm going to be curious to see what some of my viewers have encountered, because I haven't seen a single person contact me about being ordered to pay for their children's college over their objection, but I do get a lot of messages from people who have agreed to it and now they're stuck and they don't know how to get out of it. I suppose for those people who have agreed to pay for college, the only argument you may have is that at the time that you agreed, you had the money and you no longer do. Some other conceivable arguments might be something along the lines of a person agreed to pay for college in lieu of paying for child support or for spousal support, and they may want to come back to court and say, never mind, I don't want to pay for college, I'll just pay child support instead, or I'll just pay alimony instead. But there are probably situations out there where there are people who actually are paying the full child support and spousal support amounts, and then they ended up agreeing to pay for college too, and who knows how financially crippling that kind of situation is. And maybe it's something that they just didn't really get their head around until a few years later, and now they want to go back on that because they just can't survive on ramen and cup of noodles all the time. Another thing that comes to mind here is situations where parents agree to something not formally, so it's not like stipulated in front of the court and approved by the judge. It's not something that was like discussed in a settlement or a mediation. It's just maybe like the parents had a conversation, or through email or even in person, and they decided, sure, okay, we'll split the costs for college, and that may come back up in court later on when one of the parents decides that they don't want to do it anymore. And I'm not sure, maybe a judge out there will decide, since you agreed to it, now you're going to be stuck with it. It's so hard to tell what some of these judges will do because of all of the problems I talk about in my video, discretion. There's not a whole lot I can do to give people specific answers, but there is a whole lot I can do to point people to what I think is the problem in the child custody and divorce, what they kind of call the domestic relations matter types of cases that have to do with like families and stuff like that, is that the judges have so much latitude in what they can do that it's incredibly difficult to predict what they will do. And I just want people to know that this is kind of one of those things. The whole thing about being forced to pay for college, it kind of gets lumped into the whole tirade I go into in the video, Discretion. So if you haven't seen that video, please watch that video, because I think that's the source of a lot of the problems that arise in these types of cases, especially the source of a lot of bitterness that comes from the parents that feel like the system has ruin their lives, or that the system is unfair or uneven, and it's completely chaotic, and you can't, like, one thing can happen to one person with the same circumstances and a completely different thing can happen to another person. The reasons for that are in the video, Discretion, and that's the same thing that I think people will encounter here with this paying for college thing. Even if a judge doesn't order it, sometimes just the way the judges communicate to the people in the courtroom can have a profound impact on the parents' decisions going forward. The judge may say, "Oh, really? You don't think your child should go to college? You don't think that's good for your child?" And the parent may have all kinds of other reasons, like concerns about being able to pay for other things. But hearing the judge say that to them with that in that tone may make them afraid to say no, and they may say, "Okay, no, that's good. Let's go ahead and do that. I don't want to seem like a bad person, like a bad parent." And then later on, they realize, "Hey, I was kind of coerced into that. The judge shouldn't have done that." Um, so I think I kind of covered, well, there is one more thing I want to cover. Things may get complicated when it comes to parents who are divorcing that have a college fund. What I would recommend is, it's unlikely that the court will order the fund to just be emptied out and split between the parents if one of those parents puts their foot down and says, "I don't want our kids' college money to get divided in the divorce. I want it to stay right where it is so that they can use it when they enter adulthood and go into college." And in that kind of situation, the best thing you may be able to ask the judge is that you no longer are required to contribute into the fund anymore. Again, who knows where these kinds of situations will go, because some of the judges really are the types that will pick up something that you've agreed to informally and kind of run with it and turn it into an order later on. And then, of course, with that comes concerns of contempt of court, and it may be even being used against you later on in another situation that arises where best interest comes up, like relocation or modification of custody or something like that. It may not sound good that I'm kind of cautioning people against, spending money on something that's good for their kids, but this is one of the biggest sources of animosity and anger between parents, is being forced to pay for things that you cannot afford to pay. And the child support statutes are formulaic, and they're based on your gross income. And spousal maintenance, for the most part, even though it's not as strictly discussed, is supposed to be something that a person can afford to pay. And so I think it's good that people just allow those things to go into the orders and do everything else just out of the goodnesses of their hearts if and when they can. But at the same time, sometimes when you do that, it can come back to bite you later. The other parent can use it against you, take you back to court and say, "Since you agreed now, you should be stuck doing it." So I do these videos because the money issue is an issue. It's an actual problem. Parents who don't modify child support and then have a reduction in income end up really struggling through life when their child support has remained at a previous amount that is now 40, 50, 60, 70% of their income, and they don't know what to do. It affects their life. It stresses them out. In some extreme cases, the parents kill themselves. And it also makes it very difficult for them to take care of their children when the children are visiting or when the children are in their custody, because they can now not afford to spend on the children what they would have been able to spend if their child support and spousal maintenance was set at an appropriate amount. It does matter. It causes serious stress, and that's one of the reasons why in a lot of my videos I tell people to be careful what you agree to, just to look like a good person or just to be nice, because years later it can really come back to bite you. You can be stuck doing that, and you wouldn't be able to, I'm not going to say be happy, but you could find yourself potentially in such a severe spiral of depression that it impacts your ability to love your children. Everyone's going to love their children, but it's difficult when well, not everyone, most people who aren't personality disordered and don't have serious mental health issues will love their children, but it's difficult to show it to them when all you can think about all the time is if you're going to be able to buy food and pay rent for next month and stuff like that. It becomes a serious distraction. It takes up a certain amount of your ability to think straight. So as bad as it sounds when I do these videos, I don't feel bad about it because that's the truth of it. The truth of it is that the money does matter. And so I'm not saying don't pay the child support and the spousal support that's been ordered. I'm just saying be careful what you agree to on top of that. And that would include the whole thing about the college fund, or being ordered to pay for your children's college when they enter adulthood. Um, so one last tiny housekeeping matter is if you do have to pay into some kind of college fund, make sure that you put it into the order that the parents are not allowed to withdraw from that fund until the children go into college, at which point the fund disperses to the children in some way, either in a lump sum or I don't know. You would want to have that put into the order because you don't want one of the parents withdrawing the money and then saying, "Ha ha, now you can't contempt of court me." And then the other thing you may want to have put into the order is if the child ultimately decides not to go into college within a certain amount of time, the money should be divided and split and sent back to the parents, or potentially just given to the child, I don't know, buy a car or something like that with. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video. If anyone has any questions, feel free to post in the comments below. Definitely curious to hear if there are parents out there who are paying for their children's college and now they regret it. Not because they don't love their kids, but because it's becoming a financial stranglehold on their lives. And I am extremely curious to know if there are parents who have been ordered to pay for their children's college over their objection. So these are parents who did not agree to it. Those parents especially, please post in the comments below and let me know what state you're in because I want to look into that. So that being said, I will see you guys next time.